Once, a long time ago, there were two big rocks in a town. Nobody knew who put them there, and nobody came to investigate or measure them. Only the children and the people who lived in the town knew about them. There would be a gap between the stones, but sometimes it didn't seem to exist, as if the stones were coming closer together and closing the gap. But sometimes in the evening, a path would appear between the stones, like a path. The townspeople called it Stony Pass. Some villagers also called it the Walker's Path. Some didn't believe it until Margaret walked that road. Margaret was the quietest child in town. She didn't go out much to play. She stayed with her mother. Her father had disappeared in the stones a long time ago. Every night her mother would watch the stones in the valley, crying silently. Margaret kept looking into the distance and watching in silence for a long time. No one knew what was happening or what she was waiting for. One day the wind did not blow, not even a leaf moved. The birds seemed silent. Margaret got up early that morning, put her little sack on her back, took some dry bread, some water and fruit, and put the stone she had inherited from her grandmother in her pocket. Nobody understood, but there was a symbol on the stone, and sometimes Margaret would pick it up and whisper to it, as if she were talking to it. Without telling anyone and without being seen, she started walking towards the stones. Only old Dean, smoking a cigarette on the side of the house, saw her go into the valley and disappear. He said, "The path between the stones was open and Margaret went there without stopping." No one saw Margaret after that day. The village was silent. Everyone was scared. Her mother was silent. No one went to the stones. That path would reappear from time to time. Children used to go there to joke and touch the stones, but no one would go inside because they were afraid. But from that day on, they could not go near it. A long time passed, and Margaret's story grew, and not only the townspeople but other towns around the area began to talk about it, and they called it the Way of the Walkers. Some people went there out of curiosity, but they turned back because they didn't dare. Her mother says she sometimes sees Margaret in her dreams, among the stones with her grandmother's stone in her hand. The town knew that one day, after a long time, someone will enter again, and this time someone will return. But maybe. Now the town was quiet. Children could no longer run around shouting. Their parents had warned them the old people couldn't chat for long hours by the fountain. It was as if something had happened. It was as if everyone was thinking the same thing. What if there is another world between those stones? About a month passed. Her mother would sometimes go to the stones and try to walk. She would sit on the edge with a small handkerchief and her daughter's hairpin and just look at it. One day a local asked her, "What are you doing here?" Margaret's mother said, "The way is still open. You just need to be quiet and keep quiet inside." She didn't understand her, but when she told others, she said she thought, maybe that passage is visible to some people and only those who dare, those who are quiet inside. After some time, the gateway began to appear more often, not only in the morning but also at night. In the moonlight, the shadows of the stones seemed to draw you in. One day, a boy named Evan walked there at dawn, took a blanket on his back, and walked silently through the valley. The path was open like a thin path. Then he heard a whisper among the stones, but he was afraid and did not dare, as if someone was shouting from far away. The tone was familiar, soft and sad. He turned back then. scared and not daring. Years passed. Some people started to go there now. Others would listen to the stories, afraid. No one dared like Margaret. One day, old Dean found a stone at the head of the pass. There was a thin scratch on the stone. It looked like a spiral. He didn't know it was Margaret's, so he picked it up and took it home, saying, "Those who go the way of the walkers always leave a mark." Over time, these stones and the passages were talked about a lot. The name of the valley changed in the mouths of villagers and other townspeople. It was now called the Valley of the Walkers. The gorge never disappeared. The boy Evan always ran to the window, hoping to see a light or Margaret. But each time he saw the silence of the stones, but he kept saying, one day someone else would enter that path and tell us what he saw. 7 years have passed since Margaret disappeared. People were afraid to look at the stones in the valley and averted their eyes. No one asked if the pass had been opened, as if everyone was trying to cover it up. Everyone was trying to forget. Evan had no peace of mind. He kept thinking about Margaret he had told her when he was little. There are people who walk through stones. At the time, Evan had laughed it off, thought it was a childish game. But now, when he thought about it, maybe Margaret hadn't been joking at all. One morning, Evan got up early, grabbed a small notebook, some dried bread, some water, and a piece of map that was lying in the village square. There was no valley on the map, but he was looking for something to draw it on. And he remembered one more thing. There was a copy of Margaret's little stone, so he took that too. He walked closer to the valley. The moon had not yet set, and a path stretched between the stones like a path worn open by the passage of time. He put his foot on the path. Nothing happened, but he was very excited and scared. But now he was brave. He had to do it, and he was going to do it, so he took the second step, then the third. After moving forward, and at a certain point, he didn't even look back. He didn't know why, but something inside him told him not to. As he passed between the stones, he felt shadows passing by him, but he didn't look back. He just kept walking. The path narrowed and widened again as she kept going. It was like a cave, and Evan shivered inside. A faint light appeared, as if it was the end. She moved towards it. At the end of the path, right at the end of the passage, something was carved into the ground. On the stone was written a single sentence: "Those who don't belong inside turn back." That was it. Nothing else was written. At that moment, he stopped. His whole body trembled. His heart was pounding. Maybe Margaret had written this inscription. Maybe she was still alive. He stood still in front of it for hours, sitting and turning the sentence over and over in his head, thinking and thinking. When she saw the inscription on the stone, she stood still for a while. "Let those who do not belong inside return." This sentence sent a shiver through him. Part of him wanted to go back. The other part felt as if he should go on. Then he got up and continued on. The roads were no longer stone, but earth, soft earth. When he looked at the walls, he saw lines like fingerprints. Then he realized that the inside of the passage was more alive than the outside, that he was going somewhere, but he didn't know exactly where he was going. After a while, he sat down on a small rock on the ground and leaned his back against the cool wall. Then he took Margaret's stone out of his pocket and just looked at it. At that moment, he felt as if someone was with him, like a shadow, but when he looked, there was no one. But then an inscription appeared on the little stone. "I am here." She shuddered. The writing was old, but the stone was new, so it had never been there before. What if Margaret was alive, or existed in some other way? With this thought, he stood up and was determined to keep going. He kept walking and saw what looked like fingerprints on the stone, as if many people had walked this path before Evan. Finally, at the end of the passage, he came to what looked like a small room. He went in and there was a round stone table in the center of the room. The top of the stone was clean. There were small pieces of stone around it. He touched the stone and realized it was warm. "How can this be?" he said to himself. He was in a cool environment and underground, but those stones were warm. He looked from the big round stone in the middle to the table and realized that it was the same shape as the stone in his pocket. It looked exactly like the stone in his pocket. Was it a key? He took the stone out of his pocket and put it in the hole. Nothing happened. Nothing happened, but he felt relieved, as if this was what he had to do. At that moment, the stone walls began to tremble and there was a sound. He couldn't understand it. That's when he made a decision. He was going to stay here for a while, because this place seemed to remember Margaret or me, and this place seemed to complete a story. After he placed the stone in that hole, he felt like something had changed. He could feel it in the air, as if things that had been still were alive. The stones remembered and Evan just waited. He looked at the walls and saw things he hadn't noticed before. There were some lines and it was starting to glow. Very faint. They were lines drawing a path, starting at one end of the wall and going all the way to the other end, but it looked like it had been there all along. He started to follow the lines. He came to a place like a narrow bridge, empty underneath. The end of the bridge led to a small area. At the end of the road, there was only one thing: a large stone cube the size of a man. It was flat on top, and when Evan touched it, he realized something. The stone had a familiar coldness. He felt something when he touched it. Suddenly, he remembered a memory. Margaret's hands when she touched Evan when he was little. They were cold like stone, but her touch was loving. Maybe this stone held something like that. He sat down next to the stone. She leaned against the stone, closed her eyes, and an image appeared in her mind. Maybe a dream, maybe a memory. It was a woman, long hair, her back turned, and she was drawing something on the wall. But it was Margaret. Yes, he could feel it. As she was drawing on the walls, she was murmuring, "Remember, remind." It was then that he realized that this was not just a passage, it was a place like a memory. It was hidden in the stones, hidden but not lost. Stones don't talk, but if someone listens to them, they whisper. Margaret had listened to the stones there, and now it was Evan's turn. He opened his eyes and stood by the stone for a while. Then he noticed something behind the stone, a cloth. It was dirty, but there was a familiar mark in the center, a spiral. He opened the cloth, and inside was a note. It was handwritten. "This place will not forget you. The stones will always remember, and you are the one who will carry the story." Margaret was gone, but there was a warmth inside Evan, as if he was no longer alone, as if Margaret wanted to tell him something. And Evan finally understood. Sometimes exploring a place is not just seeing the stones, but hearing them. It's coming to terms with your own past. Evan got up slowly, put the stone back. He put the rag in his pocket and went back the way he had come. He reached the exit, but the sun was still high, as if time had stopped inside. Evan was someone else now, someone who had walked through the stones. He looked at the sun and said these words, "I know that one day someone else will step on this path and find that stone. Maybe they will have a dream and set off. Because stories don't change, they only change the bearer." Evan was the only one who felt that Margaret was there, and so the legend ended here.